seconds, but I will just say it's great to be with you. I'll also say by introduction, Andrew Culver, I see you're here with us. Good to have you. Andrew interned with me last year, so hopefully he'll have some questions, give a feel for what it's like working at AWEA at some point, but it's great to have you on the call. So Kate, that's at least an intro. Do you want me to jump into a bit of my story, or what's most helpful?
Yeah, go ahead. We'd love to hear it.
All righty. Let me try to keep this brief, not to bore you, but to give you a sense. So as was in the materials, Dartmouth 81, I will say a key lesson that I learned early on at Dartmouth, actually, I created my own major. Back then, they had independent studies, and I petitioned the college. And frankly, this to a degree was a life lesson for me, but combined environmental science, so pulled a whole bunch of environmental science courses and then a bunch of computer modeling courses, which I was interested in, and created a major in environmental computer modeling. The reason I say that, and I'll just blurt this piece of advice out for whatever it's worth up front, I have felt my entire professional career, one of the most important strategies: find out what you're passionate about, find out what you care about, what do you believe in, what do you value, what do you want to get done with your life, and turn that into your career. I've turned down moneyed jobs or jobs where I thought I was going to get more money to do stuff that I cared about. And not that it's always been a perfect decision I've made, but it has in the long run been a whole heck of a lot more enjoyable, and I would argue more effective. So so here is my story and the passions I pursued, and then we could talk about specifics. But I came out of Dartmouth with that degree and did not want to put on a coat and tie, so I actually was a river guide for several years in the Southeast, out west. Did some first descents over in Africa, in Kenya. This was for a period of time when I was whatever. Wanted to see the world, was not ready for an office job. Then I should also say, not a small factor, Dartmouth 81 as well. My wife got married a year after college, and so she's been a part of this journey the entire time. So fortunately, she's been a great partner in this journey. But so river guide bum for a number of years, then made the transition to Arthur Andersen, the consulting firm. Not an easy transition to go from being an outdoor bum to being a consultant, but we can talk about that if you'd like. Worked for Arthur Andersen, the consulting division, for 3 years. Was able to combine that with Dartmouth, with raft guiding to get accepted to Stanford Business School. So went there because I knew, frankly, I knew since high school I wanted to do environmental work, but I wanted to come at it from a business understanding. Went to business school, came out, worked at EPA, and this was back in the late 80s. And it was a political appointment, and ran the Clean Air Act implementation at EPA. These are the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990. Did that for the George Herbert Walker Bush administration. Left, came back up to New Hampshire to run Audubon Society of New Hampshire. Then was recruited for this totally cool job, I think, to run the National Parks Conservation Association, an advocacy group for the national parks. Did that for 15 years. Was getting a bit bored. 15 years is a long time. And also frustrated that I wanted to be doing more on climate change. I do believe it is the defining challenge for society, for life on Earth. And I was working on climate change at NPCA, but not enough for my desire and my beliefs and my understanding of what's happening on climate change. And the position opened up with the American Wind Energy Association. We are a trade association. So let me say a word about AWEA so you can get a sense of who we are. So AWEA is, again, the American Wind Energy Association. We're not an advocacy group like environmental group. I have as members about 1,000 companies in the wind and solar industries that pay dues. We collect about $12 million a year in dues, plus run conferences throughout the year. Get another roughly 12 million from that. So we're about a $25 million a year organization, about 65 staff, mostly in Washington, D.C. And fundamentally, we are a nonprofit, but we are working to advance the wind industry. This gets into the details, but are evolving from just doing wind to representing a bunch of solar companies and a bunch of storage companies, because the wind, solar, and storage industries are in fact coming together. And we can talk about this as well, but I mean, we will be a majority of the electric generation in the United States by roughly 2030. So in any case, wind is a trade association with all of its pros and cons, and we can talk about that as well. So it's, I will say again, I have loved following my passion. I'm doing things that I believe are important. I think that's critically important. I will say, this is just me, I love attempting to galvanize boards. So I report to a board of directors of 30 CEOs of those wind companies. So I enjoy, though it's not always easy, or it's not always enjoyable, but working for a board, trying to galvanize a board, trying to lead a board. And then at the same time, we've got 65 or so staff trying to guide, lead, mentor, manage the staff, again, to be able to advance renewable energy in the country. So Kate, that's at least a bit of a summary. Happy to jump into some questions. You know, you wanted me to talk about COVID, or Kate, what would you like to do?
That's awesome. First, thank you so much for that, Tom. That was fantastic. To, I guess, jump off of the last thread of the conversation, I think I'll sort of kick off the Q&A by asking you a question that we're asking all of our speakers in this series, which is, in what ways are you seeing your corner of the energy industry being impacted by the COVID crisis? And what do you see, or what do you anticipate that you might see in the next couple of months, and even into the next year or couple of years?
I could take a couple hours talking about that, but I won't. Just by way of saying, I mean, I was just before this reviewing the exec committee materials. We've got an exec committee of a WEA call on Friday to talk about this, of the impact of COVID on the industry. So here's a quick summary. Yes, COVID is impacting our industry because we have parts for wind turbines, blades, towers built all over the world. Some come out of China, Spain, Italy, and many of those parts are delayed a week, a month, whatever. So our supply chains that are international are getting disrupted. Also, we have transportation challenges because of all the stay-at-home requirements in some states. We don't have enough employees to move the parts. We got a bunch of wind blades stuck at the Mexico border because we can't get them through, because there aren't enough folks to escort them through the border coming into the U.S. So, silly but real example. We've got positive COVID cases in some of our wind farm developments where we're building the wind farms, where we're doing solar farms. We have positive cases. We've got a blade plant in the U.S. shut down, a nacelle plant shut down because of COVID. Some of these are in Iowa, South Dakota, where a lot of the meat processing facilities are shut down, and many of those workers live with workers at our plants. So, so we are seeing impacts. However, relative to other industries, we're doing pretty well. We are projecting in wind, we'll probably lay off out of 120,000 employees. We may lay off 5 to 10,000 would be my estimate, or furlough them, which is obviously relative to some other industries actually doing quite well. So we are weathering this reasonably well. That's one thought. Second thought, we are lobbying Congress for assistance. So far have not gotten any. We are lobbying Treasury for flexibility in the tax credit timeline that we got. We're not asking for any more tax credits, but some additional flexibility, an additional year to use the tax credits we've already gotten, because this year is so messed up. And they just indicated end of last week they will grant our request. So we've been lobbying fiercely to get that, and that'll likely help us, and we may not have to lay off as many folks, et cetera. So we're busy as heck here in Washington, D.C. doing all that lobbying. Now, let me paint just a quick bigger picture, because I think the bigger picture is important here. 2019, the wind industry was the fastest growing energy source in this country. Wind is the #1 renewable energy source in the country. We are also the fastest growing profession. The wind industry is hiring more people on a percentage basis than any other industry. And the second right behind that are solar technicians. So the industry in aggregate, as of 2019, was doing really well. We're taking a hit in 2020, but all indications are wind and solar and storage are going to continue taking off. So we still are profoundly cheaper than coal. We're in most parts of the country cheaper than natural gas. As I mentioned at the very beginning, all indications are we will, in the United States, have a majority wind, solar, and hydro, i.e. renewables, by 2030. You got to have a bunch of batteries there as well. But renewables are a great field. We are taking off. COVID is a significant speed bump, to mix all my metaphors. But we're doing pretty well. We're doing well partially because actually we're pretty cost effective. And we've gotten some, as other energy sources do, some tax support from Congress. I do hope next Congress will be in a political place to continue advancing climate legislation, put a price on carbon. That'll just accelerate renewable growth that much more. So the quick summary, COVID's impacting us. We will do relatively fine. We're a growing industry and we're an exciting industry. There's a lot going on. So it's actually a field, to the extent you all have interests, it's a field that's hiring in general, aside from the COVID challenges of this year. So Kate, that's a long answer to your short question.
That's perfect. And I'll actually, if you all will indulge me, I'll ask you one more question before I turn this over to everyone on the call to ask their questions. Which, just as a reminder, if you have a question, just use the raise your hand feature, and we will call on you and allow you to speak. So Tom, the one question I want to ask before I yield the floor is, for students who are interested in a job in the wind industry or anywhere else in the renewable space, how do you recommend that they approach that task? How should they do research? Who should they reach out to? How should they kind of start getting involved in that process?
Good. Let me share a few thoughts. And I don't know the answer to this question. Andrew, at some point you need to speak up, given your experience and I know your search in the industry. A couple of thoughts. One of the reasons I enjoy renewables in general is there are an amazing diversity of types of work that are needed in the renewable industry. So even in the same company, if you're a developer, just say, they need engineers, they need political scientists, they need communications experts. So developing a wind farm, you've got to have people, yes, doing the engineering of designing the wind farm, figuring out what turbines to put where, what's the wind resource. You got to have people design how to connect to the grid, how to build the transmission. So if you're a techie, there are plenty of opportunities there. If We got to do a lot of environmental permitting. So if you're a biologist, you can find a place. We need to do a bunch of work with local communities and get the local permits, but get the political local support, work the communication side. So, and I can go on, but there are many places you can plug in to the industry based on your skill sets and your passions. So just that's one observation. Secondly, and I've never been a fan of the term networking. It's such a crass concept, but it helps. So it's not that big an industry that people don't know each other. They do. And the more you can connect with me or other alums, there are a bunch of alums that are in the alumni network that are involved with the Irving Institute for Energy and Society. I'm on the board there. And I know we've got a list of alums. And maybe this is, you know this and you're totally on it, but reach out to them, call them, be a gentle nudge, call a couple of times. You know, you always want to be polite, but you guys have to be persistent because you got to be. So track people down, get to know them. Andrew, as I mentioned, through the Rockefeller Institute, I can't remember what it's called, was an intern with me last year. You know, I've been able to introduce him to a couple of the companies that work for me, and he's had some follow-up discussions. They may or may not have landed him a job, but the key point is he got some discussions with some key people he wouldn't have done if he hadn't, you know, kind of worked all this stuff. So be persistent, be approachable. You got to work it. Yes, you can throw resumes out in the mail and, you know, do 100 resumes and you'll be lucky if you get one phone call. But it's a whole lot better. Work your network, work your friends, have your parents make phone calls, whatever it is. But this is a small industry. People know everybody and you can find a home here. So some random practical, maybe, advice.
Definitely. Thank you so much. I feel like a lot of folks think a lot of members distracting with the concept of networking kind of get a pretty word, but the reality is that it's just talking in. I feel like we hear that advice all of the time from alums, and the reality is that it's good advice and you should take it. So with that, like, affirmation of Tom's observation, can anyone think they might raise your hand? We're ready to open to you all. Okay, it looks like we have Holden on the line. Mac, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure if everyone can hear me. I think it was a little bit, okay, yeah. So I'm really interested in wind as well. And I'm a rising junior now, and I was wondering what skills you think undergraduates should be thinking if they want to go into the project development side of wind, and like how should they kind of get their career started, maybe as that first step.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. One, if you can pick a couple of classes that have independent studies, or frankly, ways that you can do a project. If I see somebody's resume that says, hey, I did, whether it's an internship or a project or worked with a professor or did some advocacy on wind or on renewables. So something that's that you can do that's specific, that I can see on your resume that goes, wow, Max is serious about this. This isn't just, he isn't slightly interested, he's really interested in this. So that's one thought. Second thought, project development, and this is where you're out there, depends on what part of it you're interested, but a lot of it is working with landowners, trying to figure out who will lease some land, working with, as I mentioned earlier, you know, the local chamber of commerce and the grid operator, making sure you've got all the connections, both business and electrical, et cetera, working the political side of it, working with your engineering team. Point being, interpersonal skills. So to the extent you can, when I was in business school, we actually took a bunch of classes on interpersonal skills, authentic leadership, working with others. I hate to say this, but I'll let me see if I can get this out. You guys are at Dartmouth. You're smart. You're plenty smart. You don't need to teach me, you don't need to convince me that you're smart. You're smart. What I'm looking for is, are you passionate about this industry? And if I bring you on board, will you work well with others? Are you going to come on board and be a team player? Are you going to work well with my team? Or are you going to be a really smart person, but a real pain in the butt to work with? So what I'm looking for, and what you can demonstrate with your experiences and in your resume and practice, is working well with others, working in teams, being a good partner, being a collaborator, and showing me that you really care, that you're passionate about this. If you show me you're passionate and you're good to work with, the sky's the limit. Those are the career limiting moves for a bunch of people. If they're not passionate or they can't work with others, that's a problem. So that's hopefully helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I really do.
Other questions? Raise your hand and we'll call on you. All right, Andrew, it looks like you are up to bat.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, I definitely echo everything Tom mentioned. I had a fantastic time working at OEO. It was a great organization to get to be a part of for a summer. But I had a question. I guess this is a little more focused kind of on the industry as a whole, as opposed to kind of the career search. But I guess I recently saw an article that was exciting about how I think it was wind or maybe renewables in general had kind of produced more in the US than coal for like a full month now. Which was kind of exciting news to see. And as you mentioned, kind of with the projections toward 2030, it looks like the industry is in kind of a really strong position. What do you see as kind of the main barriers that still exist, either on kind of a legislative side within the government or within kind of just the business development side of things? What do you see as the main hurdles the industry is going to be facing kind of in the next couple of decades?
Wow, big question, good question. So a couple of thoughts. One, let's not forget, not that you were going to, but I mean, it's a battle out there. It's a war, and you better believe wind is competing with coal and natural gas. It's massive competition. So the barrier is, to a degree, making sure at the end of the day we're the cheapest thing out there. And you better believe, obviously, the coal industry is looking for bailouts. The natural gas industry, oil and gas, are looking for financial support. So everybody's crying wolf. Everybody's hollering and screaming and looking for political support. Right now, we've got a president of the United States who loves coal and hates wind. I mean, he, as you probably have heard, I mean, roughly on a weekly basis, he's trashing the wind industry. It was a couple months ago, he said we cause cancer, so that was a wild ride. For a 12-hour period, we had to get the American Cancer Society, and they were easy to do it, but to issue a press release, no, wind energy doesn't cause cancer. But the reason I go on that tangent, I mean, we have to win the political battles. And sorry if I'm getting too political here, but the president is not a supporter of wind. Wind and renewables will not do as well if he has a second term. So we got to win the political issues. So there's that whole layer. Then perhaps, Andrew, more to your point, transmission. So the grid right now, there is not enough transmission. If we build a bunch of wind farms in Texas and in the Midwest and North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, Kansas, there's not enough transmission to get all that renewable energy, or for that matter, if you put a bunch more solar in California and some other key regions. But the point being, there's not enough transmission to move that renewable load to where it's needed. So we've got to build more transmission, and who wants a transmission line in their farm or near their neighborhood? Not many people. So there's a big barrier there. There's a big barrier that somewhat touches on the political front, but every time we cite a wind farm, when you're building it, you got to get the local permits, and the planning board or the county commission, it's different based on where, needs to vote to approve the permit or whatever. And you better believe gas companies, coal companies are in those exact communities, seeing where we want to develop and hiring local residents to rally their neighbors in opposition to wind to show up at that public hearing and stand and say, hey, wind causes cancer, or wind's going to make my kids get cancer, or they can put out a lot of doubt. And so we're having to battle community by community by community to site the wind farms. So there are barriers with transmission, there's barriers with siting. I do think we need to keep, this isn't really a barrier, but we got to keep driving down the costs. So the wind turbines have to get more efficient, solar has to get more efficient. So there's a lot to still evolve for the industry. People are talking about the not just an evolution, but a revolution in electric generation, which is happening. I mean, the degree of change, the number of coal-fired power plants that are getting shut down is, you know, the likes of which we've never seen before, the amount of change. So that gives Andrew a bit of a sense of the challenges we face. So those are the things that keep me up at night.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Tom. And it looks like we already have, can you all hear me? It looks like my internet connection is unstable. All right, cool. It looks like we already have another connection question from Sarah. So Sarah, I'm gonna just ask you to go ahead and ask it.
Okay, cool. Thank you. You mentioned that you liked the idea of having a business perspective on the renewable energy industry. And I was wondering what you would suggest for having an interest in a business degree later. How do you work toward that as part of your undergraduate education?
Great. Boy, a bunch of things I want to talk about there. So let me, a couple different thoughts. One, business schools have historically, and I presume now despite COVID, get a lot of applications. And like everything else, you got to figure out a way to be unique, to have a compelling story that is interesting, because they are trying to recruit a class of diverse perspectives to have great debates and discussions, et cetera. This was not planned on my behalf, but I'll share the story. So yes, I did the Arthur Andersen thing, the consulting that showed I had some business understanding, but I ended up running one of the rafting companies and ended up doing a first descent. We were the first people to successfully kayak the Tana River in Kenya. And the reason I say that, it actually was a hell of an expedition, and we almost got eaten several times. Crocodiles were attacking us. We had hippos, we had hyenas. It was not pretty. But the reason I share that is that was a key part of my business school application. One of the references was my partner on that trip. And I always joke, but it's serious, and I talked to Stanford afterwards. At one level, I'm a traditional applicant to business school. They went, wow, all right, this guy was in Africa fighting off crocodiles, and the leadership experience, the management experience, he's a risk taker, he's thinking outside the box, he actually will be pretty entrepreneurial, he's likely gonna have a different career, he's not just gonna go to Wall Street and be a consultant or whatever the heck. So point being, if you want to go to business school, make sure you've got some diverse experiences. Make sure you've got a reason to go to business school other than get a nice paying management job. So that's one thought on getting to business school. One other related thought, if I can say it, and it relates to, I think, the benefit of a business school, and it's the following. This gets back to career stuff, but one of, if not another limiting factor, in addition to people skills, when Max, we were talking earlier, the importance of people skills, another one, it is important to build throughout your career a broad understanding of issues. So by that I mean, if you're an environmental biologist, that's great, but make sure you understand political systems. Make sure you spend a little bit of time doing business stuff. My point being, as you progress in your career, if you're just a wildlife biologist and just hammer away at that niche, you're going to tap out. And I have found in my career, having, yes, some environmental stuff, but some business stuff, and going to business school where I worked for some computer companies, point being, somewhat, I've had diverse set of experiences, so I don't have massive blind spots, or it's not as though I know a little bit about a lot of things. I know something about politics. I know something about business. I know something about environmental stuff. I know something about management. And that has allowed me throughout my career, and you look at my random resume, but to move and shift and hopefully keep growing and getting better. Business school, not that it's the only one, other schools do this, law school as well, but keep trying to broaden your horizon, broaden your skill sets, understand other people's, other industries' perspective. If you're a hardcore environmental advocate, guess what? Business people aren't the devil. I work with some environmentalists that go, oh, those dang business types, they don't care about anything. Not so true. Or I talk to business types that goes, damn those tree huggers, they just care about trees and bears and nothing else. Well, that's not true. So stupid examples, but get diverse experiences, broaden your thinking. I think liberal arts education helps with that at Dartmouth, but so long-winded speech. Sarah, hopefully that touched somewhere along the way on your question.
Yes, thank you.
All right, do folks have other questions that they'd like to ask? If so, raise your hand. Tom, while we're waiting for another person to put words to the question that they have, one thing I would like to ask you. I was having a conversation earlier today about the purpose of education. Whether the purpose of education is to transmit some finite skill set, whether it's to give students a moral compass that they go out into the world with and affect change, make the world a better place, whether it's a place to develop social, emotional skills. I'm wondering, as a person who's gone to undergraduate and graduate school, and who has a couple of kids who are, I think all your kids are either in college or out of college. What do you think about the role of education in people's lives, and what people should try to take out of their experiences in higher education beyond what they're learning in the classroom?
A real small, easy question there, Kate. Thank you. I would share the following, that it's a multi-dimensional education. Yeah, you're in the classroom learning an intellectual or analytic capability. I get all that, and that matters. But oh my God, the number of dimensions of my personality that I think I need to draw on throughout the day is pretty broad. And I attempt to draw from, yes, something I learned in a classroom somewhere and all of that. But as we've said, my people skills, my sense of moral compass, you said it, my sense of confidence, my sense of perseverance. You didn't mention it. I am a pretty serious athlete. I row competitively. There are a lot of lessons to learn from athletics and from the arts. So yes, time in the classroom is important, but wow. Yeah, there are so many dimensions to life and to being happy and fulfilled and satisfied. You better, while you're at Dartmouth and throughout your life, be, yes, learning, but be caring, thinking about your place in this world, what matters to you. I talk with my staff, whether here or at NPCA, and one of the questions I ask them is, okay, why are you working here? Why do you do what you do? Why do you care? And when I'm asked the question, it truly is, I am trying to help save life on Earth. And that gets me out of bed in the morning. That's meaningful to me. And I have a wife of 38 years. That matters to me, and that's not easy. And, I got to put time and attention there. I've got 3 wonderful kids. They matter. One, I can't remember if we mentioned Dartmouth 17. So, life is complicated as hell. I will also say, I have made some really big mistakes. So I'm just going to warn you, somewhere along the way, you are going to really screw up. And when that happens, it's not pretty. You'll learn a bunch. It takes some perseverance. But welcome to life. And you're going to have some setbacks. You're probably going to get fired somewhere along the way. And enduring all of that and learning from that, that takes some courage, that takes some confidence. And it's those type of people I want to work with, not to bring it back to jobs, but all of that other self-discovery, pardon me for saying it, put it in this way, that shit matters. In one of the, it's somewhat of a hackneyed phrase, it's a buzzword, but I believe it. In leadership classes, some of them talk about authentic leadership, which is all about the point that, there are many different styles of really effective leaders. You got the really charismatic folks, and you got the ones that are smart. You got the Elon Musk, who's smarter than heck, but a little eccentric, and you've got others. But what's most important is that your leadership, if as your leaders, big, small, big groups, small groups, it's got to be authentic. If you're coming across like some big muckety muck, and that's not really who you are, or you are going to be more effective as a leader if you know who you are, you communicate who you are, you communicate what you care about, you share with staff, you're vulnerable with staff. You got to be authentic to yourself, and you're not going to learn how to be authentic in the classroom. So yes, go study environmental sciences 101 and learn that, but be thinking about who you are, what you care about, understand who you are. That stuff matters arguably more in a happy, successful life.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. It looks like we have 3 hands raised right now. So we'll go to Sonia, followed by Gerben, followed by Iris. And then after those questions are answered, we'll circle back and see if we have time for more.
Hi, firstly, thank you. It's really great to hear about your experiences and career. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your time at the National Parks Conservation Association and any advice for kind of that realm, and any insights you have into how the current pandemic might be affecting that realm in the future.
Yeah. Let me say a word about NPCA. So NPCA, National Parks Conservation Association, is the independent advocacy group for the national parks. So it's separate from the Park Service, founded in 1919 as a membership organization to advocate for parks. So being separate, it's free to be the advocate and uphold the values, the ideals of national parks as places to be protected unimpaired for the enjoyment of present and future generations. It was a dream job. It was a spectacular job. I raised my kids, my wife and I raised our kids while I was there. And the reason I just say that, I mean, what's not to love? I was helping to protect the national parks. And we traveled to all the parks, and I took the kids with me to all the parks. So it's great that way. I'll also say it's a wonderful job because it gets at this question in a way of sustainability. The parks are places that, again, are to be protected unimpaired for the enjoyment of present and future generations. So it's all about how do we enjoy these places, i.e. use them, but keep them protected. Wow, that's a huge challenge to use and protect in the same place. How do you do that? So there's a lot of intellectual, scientific, sociological thinking that goes into that. I think I think we'll work our way through the COVID pandemic, and the parks at some point will open back up, and we'll be totally fine, if you will. So I think the parks will be fine, the profession will be fine. I think the parks are also great to work on as a career because they touch so many people in so many ways. Not everybody, but they are a rallying point. So I would heartily encourage people to get involved. There again, if you're interested in parks, spend some time, working for the Park Service, spend some time working for business, go work on Capitol Hill, go work in a local state government or local community, and then come back to the parks. But my point being, if you only work for the Park Service, I guarantee after 10 years, you're going to have blinders and you're just going to see things the way the Park Service sees it. And that's a problem. So get a diversity of experiences as best you can, and then work on the parks, but make sure you understand other views.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome, Sonia.
All right, Gerben, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah.
As a past Park Service employee, I appreciate that advice.
Well, you can also disagree with it, so feel free.
No, I agree. I think we'll see. My question is, if you could go back to undergrad or to business school, are there any experiences or skills that you would have wished you had added to your skill set or list of experiences? Maybe thinking also about the current landscape, if that changes your answer at all.
A couple of, I'm not sure these are connected. Maybe I'll connect them as I'm talking my way through it. For those of you that have technical or analytic interests, I kind of wish, frankly, I had, stronger analytic technical capabilities early on in my career. And the reason I say that is later on in one's career, you're not going to get more technical. You get less technical. You get more general. And I might have considered also doing a master's or a PhD in environmental science, or I personally wish I had a technical area where I was an undeniable expert, or where I was clearly competent. I guarantee you I do not have an area that I'm clearly competent. And I kind of wish I had my niche. So if you're technically oriented, I'd encourage you to invest in that. And I think to a degree that does apply. You guys are earlier on in your careers. Keep, and I said what I said about interpersonal skills, and I mean that. And you're going to have to get a master's, I think, or I would strongly encourage one, if not a PhD. So I think degrees matter. Forgive me for saying it, but having Dartmouth on my resume has not hurt. Having Stanford Business School has not hurt. It has helped. So going to good schools and going at least a master's, if not a PhD, helps. So I would tend to do more technical stuff. I would also, I don't always come across this way. I'm a little bit more introverted than I am extroverted. I would, while you're at Dartmouth and when you're in grad school, if you are, man, build those bonds. It's been humorous. This is odd, but I'll still say it. As we've been having this Skype, my emails flash across, and every 18 months to 2 years, 10 of my brothers at SAE, I was a fraternity person at SAE at Dartmouth, we get together, and I've been getting a bunch of emails because we're coordinating our next get together this fall. And actually, we just did a Zoom with those 10 fraternity brothers of my class, 81, a couple last week. And the reason I just say that is, man, you get to my point in my life, and I'm not dead yet, but those bonds matter. Your friends that you have now, if you take care of those friendships, those are your friends for life. Another buddy from Dartmouth, is my best friend. He was in my wedding. We're talking weekly, whatever. So my advice back to that is, man, take care of your relationships, your friends, your dear friends. Think about them, stay in touch with them. Maybe this is obvious and you guys are doing it, but that stuff matters more and more, and it's fun to have people you stay in touch with, you care about. They're part of your lives. So I'm getting preachy. I'll leave it.
No, it's definitely good advice. As a recent grad, definitely something you should invest time in. Iris, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you, Tom, for being here today. Originally my question was actually going to be about resilience in renewable energy. There's been a lot of discussion lately around COVID and around how it will affect the need for resilience in supply chains, in structure and governance. But then you talked about your failures, so I actually wanted to ask about any major failure in your path and what you learned from them. So kind of pick whichever one you prefer to answer.
All right. Sure. I'll put the biggest mistake that at least I still carry as a burden. So when I was at NPCA 13 years into that position, I was starting to get antsy. And I looked at a job, and this is all public knowledge because it was in the press, and accepted the job to run the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. And it was a kind of a right turn, or a shift, because I was bored. I was, thought of, hey, getting back to New Hampshire would be great. I'll also say, perhaps not surprisingly, given the career I'm choosing, I was kind of interested, hey, do I want to run for office? Do I want to get into politics? And maybe run for governor of New Hampshire. And a good way to step to that was the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. So I accepted that job, and there were 4 or 5 months between accepting it and when I was going to be up there. And it became clear to me that I suddenly realized, all right, that's a lovely vision, getting into politics, but actually what drove me most was environmental stuff. That's what I'd been working on. That's what I cared about. I had this vision of getting into politics to do environmental leadership from politics, and realized as I started working with the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation Board, yeah, I could do some environmental stuff, but it was like 10% of the job, not as much as I had thought. So what did I learn? I kept that job search relatively secret, somewhat understandably, but I didn't talk to a lot of my friends. I didn't talk to colleagues. I didn't do enough soul searching. It was a bit of a cavalier decision. So my learning from that was, you got to do a better job running ideas by other people, bouncing ideas. I have biases. My brain will get wrapped in a certain way. Talk to more people about stuff. Do reference checks. Hold the mirror up closer to yourself. Because I made a cavalier, uninformed decision that was a significant career whoops. Now, I think I've recovered from it, but I still have to explain it away every job interview I do. So I've dumped on you my biggest mistake in my life, but there you have it. And what I learned, hopefully.
Thank you. That was very insightful.
Well, I don't know, but you can now make a different mistake. Don't make that mistake. Make some other mistake.
It looks like we have time for just one more brief question and answer. So I'll turn it over to Kara, and then if you have a question you didn't get to ask, if you want to just send me an email after this is all over, I'd be happy to try and get that question answered for you. So time for just one more. Kara, would you like to ask it?
Yeah, so I will say that I ended up on a plane sitting right next to you, and I saw that there was like a little windmill. If I'd known, I found your business card. I still have it, so and, it was awesome. But I didn't even know.
Did we chat at all, or was I completely rude?
No, you definitely chat. You gave me your business card. You even put me in touch with someone at AWEA to ask some follow-up questions, which was awesome.
Hilarious. Good.
Yeah. And he was in the middle seat, I just want to say. But when I look at your bio, one of the things, I wish I'd known that you were a Dartmouth alum. I think that would have been really fun to chat about. But one of the things that really stuck out was your undergrad degree. And I'm a little bit biased because it's similar to what I do right now. But I'd be curious to know, with that modeling and analytical framework, how do you use that in your job today?
Reality is I don't. I loved it and still enjoy it. I met recently, I can't remember the name of the lab, but a Dartmouth alum who runs a lab at MIT doing a bunch of systems modeling. And, so that was, at least for an hour, I was able to geek out with him, or at least get into it. So the reality is I don't use much, if any, of that in my work. I had a lot of fun with it. I will say,
or even the outputs of that, that AWEA does, or others, et cetera.
So yes, so we have a research team at AWEA that we have a bunch of models that we run, and then we have some consultants that run some other energy modeling. So I yes, get briefed up on those models, read the results, and it's good to have a technical capability. But I will say, 80% of my job is working with staff, working in meetings, attempting to lead my board. So most of my job is management, leadership, policy, political, for better or for worse. And you may be interested in my job or may not. I will say this slightly relates. I really appreciated somebody, this was a while ago, but I said, so career-wise, say 10 years from now, what do you want to be doing? And this person said, Tom, I want your job. And it's like, okay, good. I appreciate that, but not everybody wants my job, that's for sure. Yeah, I use some of the technical stuff, but this maybe is an unfair generalization. Often, when you're at a more senior level in an organization, you end up dealing less with the technical stuff and more with all the other policies, procedures, management, leadership, external affairs type stuff. So, Kara, I'm not sure that's particularly helpful, but it's thrilling to reconnect. You know, and I would, let me actually, Kate, say this, and Andrew can back me up on this, at least. I'd love to be helpful. However, as Andrew knows, you know, sometimes it's not one email, but it might be 2 or 3 that you need to send to get my attention. So if there are ways that a WIA can be helpful, we do have internships. You know, track me down. Try to, you know, I don't know. I love to help folks and might as well help folks at Dartmouth. Yeah, let's try to have some fun, reconnect when you can.
That's awesome. Thank you, Tom. I'd be happy to put, if anyone on the call is interested in that opportunity, I'd be happy to put you in contact with Tom after this is over. So just shoot me an email. And if you'll indulge me for just one more minute, I'd like to, first of all, thank you, Tom, so much for joining us. And thank you everyone for all of your great questions tonight. I'd like to do a quick plug for next week's event. Hopefully this screen share works. Oh, nope, that is my email account. Why is this? Hold on. That is still my email account. Can you see this? Okay, perfect. Thank you for your patience. So if you go to our website, you can see our Alumni Sparks series is on there. You see this great plug for tonight's event. Once this is over, you'll see a link at the bottom with the link to the recording. So if you want to share that with anybody or watch it yourself again, you're welcome to do that. Next week, we have Amy Barnes joining us. Amy is currently working at an NGO that is trying to sort of connect and spur further climate action and dialogue between the state of California and China. She has a lot of previous experience working for the state of California, which I think is a really cool piece of the puzzle. I'm not sure that we've featured someone yet in this series who is working in the like public service sector. I'm particularly interested in that. Hopefully some of you are too. So keep an eye peeled for advertising and a sign up form for this. And if you have any further questions, feel free to shoot me an email. So I guess with that, we'll end this. Tom, are there any closing remarks you'd like to give as we sign off?
Honestly, I enjoyed this. I hope it was slightly helpful. And as I mentioned, please track me down as helpful. And I'll try to do whatever I can to assist you in your journey, because God knows there have been people that have assisted me in mine. So I'd love to return the favor. So track me down if you can and be persistent.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.
Thanks all. Good night.
Thank you for joining.